and I'm going to be continuing these slides of this talk, and I already did this one and this one and this one, and this is where it really starts. And I'm only going to do about 20 minutes, see how it goes, and this will just bring me to setting the scene for the Lucy Letby case, and saying a lot of things which a UK audience will probably already know, Dutch audience maybe didn't. And of course my talk is about the similarities between the cases of Lucy Letby in the UK and 20 years ago, or less, Lucia de Berk in the Netherlands. And what I want to be talking about are the similarities, and of course I want to explain the similarities. And I will certainly get to saying what my hypothesis for why the cases are so similar. Now, I think there are three main, at the high level, points of commonality of the two cases. Okay, in both cases we have a hospital where there is an inexplicable, or at the time thought to be inexplicable, surge in deaths in a unit of a medical care organization, and at the same time a striking coincidence of events, unpleasant events, negative events, with the presence of a particular nurse. In both cases, Lucy or Lucia seemed to be always present at incidents, which might have been deaths or might have been collapses, which at the time seemed unexpected and inexplicable. On the other hand, in both cases, there was no direct proof of harm doing by anyone, let alone a nurse, and let alone by the particular nurse who was kind of in view from the start. So this is kind of the same case. Now, the next main similarity is that in both cases there is a confession of sorts. Of course, this was only discovered way into police investigations and so on. But in both cases, what appears to have been a confession plays an enormous role in the trials which followed, and which certainly also plays a role in what convinces onlookers, what convinces juries, what convinces judges, what convinces the media, the population. You ask somebody why they think Lucy Letby is guilty, and then they'll say she confessed, didn't she? It's reported in all the newspapers. It's a key point of the public picture of the case, something which looks like a confession in both cases. But by the way, the inexplicable surge in deaths and the impossible coincidence of Lucy Letby or Lucia de Berk always being there, seeming to be always be there, are also items which convince the public and which are discussed in the newspapers and in social media, and which are often named by people. You ask, why do you think Lucy Letby is guilty? Well, the spreadsheet, right? In Lucia de Berk, there's something exactly similar. In both cases, there's further one item of evidence which stands out among all the others. I mean, there's, as I mentioned, in both cases, there's a mountain of more or less circumstantial evidence, and in most cases, I mean, most of that evidence in both cases is very circumstantial. Circumstantial evidence means it doesn't mean much on its own, but it has to be supported by other pieces of evidence. It has to be interpreted. It can perhaps be interpreted. It can certainly be interpreted in different ways. And much of the circumstantial evidence in both those two cases can even be interpreted as evidence for innocence as much as for evidence of guilt. Okay, we may discuss that later. I'm watching the clock a little bit. The time clock is ticking away. Yeah, so let me get back to the key piece of evidence which does stand out in that mountain of circumstantial evidence is something thought of as a smoking gun, even called a smoking gun. And in both the two Lucy and Lucia cases, it's an item of forensic evidence, so it's scientific. It seems very conclusive when you first hear about it. In the Lucy Letby case, there seems to be proof that two babies were murdered. Two babies were attacked by giving them insulin which they should not have given. We have two results of immunoassays which, from a forensic point of view, a medical point of view, strongly suggest poisoning. Somebody has poisoned these two babies on two occasions with insulin. In the Lucia de Berk case, we have digoxin poisoning. We have a toxicological analysis which, based on the samples taken at post-mortem, of which suggests that baby Amber actually died of digoxin, which seemed to have been admitted to that baby, and there's supporting evidence that Lucia was the last person who saw the baby alive. She had opportunity because some monitors were switched off for some time, and the toxicologists attest that the baby is, based on what he's seen, the baby was died of being poisoned by digoxin. Well, we have Lucia de Berk having opportunity. We have her having opportunity and means, obviously, of being a nurse in the hospital, can get hold of digoxin. We have a motive because we have her strange diary writings, so that's enough to convince many people. Right. Now, I've mentioned the mountainous size of the circumstantial evidence, which also is evident in the duration of the trials in both cases. There's an awful lot to go through, both complex medical evidence and both, items from the personal lives or professional lives of the suspects. A mountain of circumstantial evidence. In the Lucy Letby case, we have the take-home, the handover notes which were taken home and saved and interpreted as trophies by the prosecution. We have the strange annotations in the diary. We have some further medical documents taken home and saved, which shouldn't have been there. We have her behavior, Lucy Letby's behavior under cross-examination. The strange behavior which is interpreted as evidence of guilt. She lies, she behaves inappropriately. And in the Lucia de Berk case, one can catalogue the similar stuff. We have enormous media attention, enormous moral outrage by the public of the terrible things which seem to have happened. Right, I think I can move on to the next slide. Yes. Now, there are important differences. Of course. To begin with, we have different... Now I'm forgetting the word. I always forget the official words for this. We have completely different systems of criminal trial. We have in the UK an adversarial system with two barristers battling each other in front of a jury, and with a judge acting as some kind of no, you see, I'm forgetting that word too, referee. So it's a public fight between two people wearing weird clothes and separated from the public and close to the judge by the bar. That's why they're called barristers. They can cross the bar. And the jury are onlookers, 12 ordinary folk chosen at random from the population. So they are basically peers of the person being tried. Well, I should say of the person accused of horrible things. What is being tried is the evidence against her. In the Netherlands, we have an inquisitorial system, which means it's like an inquiry. Okay, British are now familiar with an inquiry. We have a board, in fact, of 3 professional judges, a chairperson and 2 further judges assisting, and they call witnesses, and witnesses speak to the judges, not to the jury. They speak to the judges, and of course the public hears, and what is said is what is going on is reported. But cross-examination, there's cross-examination of the suspect, the accused, too, in both cases, and the judges are observing the cross-examinations by lawyers, a lawyer in the Netherlands. But of course, there's a prosecuting lawyer and a lawyer and a defense lawyer. And the defense lawyer is merely the spokesperson, the legal spokesperson for the defendant. And the defendant can be cross-examined too, and it can be cross-examined by both lawyers, I think. But really, what is going on is the judges are running the show. They are putting questions to persons giving evidence. Another difference is, of course, culture, UK culture, Netherlands culture. There's time. The Netherlands case was 10 or 15 years ago. It started in 2001, was concluded definitively in favor of Lucia in 2010. So there were trials and hearings for a period of 5 years. Then the case was completely and irrevocably lost by Lucia de Berk, shut down. She was convicted for life. But there was a further avenue going to the Dutch equivalent of the CCRC, and that process took a further 5 years, and that during those 5 years was also the period of a public campaign. Public campaign really only started in 2005 and went on right up to 2010, when Lucia was finally exonerated. Okay, and 2010 is 15 years ago. Times have changed. And anyway, the culture of the Netherlands is different one from that of the UK. And in the meantime, social media has taken over our lives, as you could say. And of course, this YouTube video, if I post it on YouTube, is going to be part of social media. And I am an agitator, a campaigner, as well as a scientist, and I'm using social media and every tool available to me to encourage the public to understand why they may believe that Lucy Letby is innocent, and to encourage the system, the elite, the actors in the system, those who can act, to encourage them to believe the same and to do the right thing, to do what they can do to facilitate a retrial or even a straight quashing of the convictions. But certainly at the very least there should be a new inquiry. Now, okay, also on this slide is my little summary of why the two cases are so similar despite all the differences, and that is because they are both completely overshadowed by the fact that there is suspicion of a horrible crime, yet actually there was no crime. The suspicion of a horrific crime which didn't happen. There was no crime. This is like a witch hunt and a witch trial. Witches don't exist. So witch hunts are hunts to obtain proof of criminal acts which never happened. And the ensuing witch trial is a trial performed to seal what has been found during the witch hunt and to present it to the public and to allow the elites to carry out what the public now is going to want them to do, which is going to be to execute the witch. And in a case where there is no crime, but there is a suspicion of a horrific crime, there is moral outrage in society. And I would say that 3 wise judges who, highly educated professional judges, are just as susceptible to emotion as 12 ordinary citizens, as an ordinary jury. And one can see in the Lucia de Berk case, actually, in just looking at the body language of the judges, the 3 top Netherlands judges who convicted her for full life, actually, at the retrial in 2004. One can see the depth of their feeling as they pronounce their verdict. By the time in 2004 that they gave Lucy de Berk essentially full life, they were utterly horrified, utterly disgusted. They utterly hated her. They were utterly convinced she was guilty of the crimes for which they convicted her, and naturally they suspected her of having committed many more crimes, which unfortunately they were not able to convict her, but they would have done if they could. It was just as emotional a sentencing as one could say than the sentencing by Judge Goss was of Lucy Letby. Of course, he did not show emotion in an emotional way, but he expressed his outrage, his horror, and his conviction that Lucy Letby was the most evil person imaginable. So you have the emotion, you have all the emotion, and the emotion is somehow driven despite the absence of evidence, because there cannot be real evidence because there were not real crimes. Right, I can move on and see if I can quickly give a little sketch of what most people now know, that in January 2015, Lucy Letby was fully qualified as a neonatal intensive care nurse at the Countess of Chester Hospital. And in the subsequent 18 months, of course, one often focuses on the last 12 of those 18, but actually the investigation was focused on the 18 months when Lucy Letby was at the unit and fully qualified, and so therefore also very responsible for difficult tasks, one of the 2 most qualified. nurses in those 18 months. And during that time, there was an outbreak, was an evident outbreak of deaths and of course accompanied by events which may not have immediately led to deaths, but which perhaps later did, or events, horrible events, shocking events, which led to babies being transferred out of the hospital while still alive, and when they subsequently rapidly recovered somewhere else. Okay, so there was 18 months of shock and horror, and Lucy was very often there. And that's right, that's one death a month, and in recent years there had been 2 or 3 deaths per year, right? The difference is obvious. It's extraordinary, it's shocking, it's appalling. And the prior average annual mortality of 2 or 3 per year resumed basically resumed in July 2016. Lucy was no longer anywhere near the babies, but also, of course, the unit had been demoted from level 2 to level 1. And of course, this was wise and sensible. I would say both of those actions of the management at that point were absolutely reasonable and justified. And together, they had exactly the effect which was desired, which was that the mortality rate fell to the pre-Lucy Letby normal. Well, the hospital administrators also completely responsibly and as they should called in an external investigation by appropriate investigators, by the RCPCH, and that worked in autumn 2016 and produced a report which was published, publicly published. I mean, it was ready earlier, but it was actually in what do you call it, redacted version, hiding names of the nurse. It identified, when was it actually published? In February, I believe, 2017, and it identified multiple failings in medical care and management at the unit. It did not see suspicious deaths, though it saw that there were deaths which were hard to understand and which merited further forensic investigation, which kind of happened, but I mean, there were 2 further investigations, you could say, finding nothing. The report found that the nursing was excellent. But as I said, in February 2017, that report came out, and essentially, at least according to Breary and Doctors Breary and Jairam, it triggered them to go to the police. And they had their first visit to the police in April 2017, and we know that they told the police that normally there were only 3 deaths per year, that normally deaths and collapses are explainable and explicable. Actually, that's not true, because we know that half of neonatal deaths are never understood properly or completely. So, but anyway, this is what they told the police. And they told the police that there had been this enormous burst of deaths and collapses, and there were so many of them. And there's my alarm clock going. I'm going to stop it, or I'm going to actually reset it, start it again at 5 minutes, carry on a little while longer. I hope it doesn't, well, I hope to get to the end fast. Police investigation was announced in the newspapers in May, and in no time, Dr. Dowie Evans, a retired Welsh paediatrician, turned up at the hospital even and became an advisor to the police investigation. Right, and in particular, he, as far as I know, recommended certain other experts to help the police in those fields of expertise where he felt himself less qualified. Well, the consequence was the police investigation, and a police investigation which rapidly, if not immediately, was focused on a particular nurse. Lucy Letby was arrested in 2018 and in 2019 and in 2020, and the first 2 times I believe she was charged, but she was interrogated for the maximum number of days and released on bail. The 3rd time she was charged and denied bail and charged with 7 murders and 12 attempted murders. I've written down there. The trial only started in 2022 due to Corona, so she spent 2 years in jail, charged with a huge list of murders and attempted murders. The trial started in autumn 2022 and lasted 10 months, resulting in the well-known 7 murders and 7 attempted murders and 14 full life sentences for those 14 charges. Of course, there were. This doesn't correspond to the indictments, because the indictments have attempted murders of babies who later were successfully murdered, and so on. So, well, lots of opportunity for confusion and different numbers appearing in different contexts. My apologies. Prosecution appealed because there was certainly one charge where the jury did not come to a non-guilty conclusion, but did not come to a verdict at all. And the prosecution was allowed, apparently could automatically appeal for a retrial of that case, which conveniently further silenced media criticism of the case, because due to an ongoing case, contempt of court rules still applied, as they had applied since the trial started. One was not allowed to criticize the prosecution case either in the media or in the social media in the UK. Right, so there was a retrial, and Lucy was found guilty after that case was retried, and it was a very, very short trial, and the jury were told they could use the fact that basically they knew she was a serial killer, so they didn't take much. They didn't need very long to come to a conclusion. The jury were actually told they didn't need to know or have any idea how she did it. That was not needed either. So basically, she was found guilty based only on the statistics of the earlier convictions. Lucy applied for an appeal against both the trial verdicts. The applications were turned down. Police made further investigations, and the thorough inquiry started and is now ongoing, and is meant to determine why Lucy was not stopped earlier. Well, in 30 seconds, let me just mention that things are going on now, and Lucy has a new defense team, and critical publications have appeared in the media, and of course in social media, and in the media also in the UK. And right now, the CCRC has received an application for an appeal, and we will see what happens. And that is the end of this video, which I stop. I'm going